Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Today on CityCast Philly, it's our weekly politics episode. This is going to be Mayor Sherrell Parker's second year in office. So what big policy objectives does she have for 2025? We're going to take a look at city council dynamics. And it's another big election year here in Philly. This time for district attorney. Is Larry Krasner going to face a lot of opposition? Pat Loeb, City Hall Bureau Chief for KYW, is here to break it all down. It's Wednesday, January 8th. I'm Trina Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Pat, how was chatting with Mayor Sherrell Parker? You guys had an interesting conversation, and it wasn't about politics. It was about being a mom.
Yeah, I mean, she is the first woman mayor. That's been well established. But to me, being the first mom mayor is a very different status than being a dad mayor. And I just wondered how that had affected her governing. And she said, it has. It has. She mentioned her passion for the extended school year and extended school day as things that were really motivated by understanding what it takes to raise a child. And she talked about her own village, including her ex-husband.
Right, who helps out, as she thanked him in the interview.
And said, where was this before the divorce? Little joke.
Yeah.
But, she admitted, I think that she's a little torn at times, and that there are times when she has, or at least she mentioned one specific example where she had official duties on a holiday and decided to cancel them and go mini golfing and bowling and eating junk foods. So, yeah, I think there is something to the fact that she's the first mom mayor that makes her a little different.
How many mayors have you covered before?
She's my third mayor this go-round in Philadelphia. Back in the 1980s, I covered Bill Green and Wilson Good, actually. But I became City Hall Bureau Chief in 2016, just as Mayor Kenny was becoming mayor. But I did get the tail end of Mayor Nutter.
I mean, in this conversation, as she's explaining, how she's juggling these enormous responsibilities of running Philadelphia and managing her personal life, as she is the chief executive of the city and covering politics in her first year, what have you learned from her?
Well, one reason I asked her about her son Langston is I've met him. She sometimes brings him with her if it's especially on a weekend. And, he gets to meet these famous people. And I just had a hunch, having raised 4 children myself, that this was something that was impacting her role as mayor. And I guess what I learned is my instinct was correct, that it is, but that she can juggle it, so that she has established a group of people around her who help her, I guess, compartmentalize her role as a mom and her role as mayor so she can focus on each role as she's doing them.
Within this first year, she's had several different, huge policy objectives like clean and green and having a government that Philadelphians can touch. And she also talked about, in your interview with her, about the criticisms that she's faced, right?
Yes. And, Lord knows she has faced criticisms for a variety of reasons. And she accepts that. And she very openly says, I am not perfect. I am learning through the feedback that I get from other people. But that the main thing for her is that she is doing the best she possibly can. And she has been in government really since she was a teenager. She did teach for a while, but she started out as an intern in city council, and she was a state representative and she was a city council member. She has been around government her whole life, so she had very clear ideas of what she wanted to do when she became mayor. And she has basically altered through executive order the structure of the government. She separated streets and sanitation. She separated licenses and inspections. These are things that people have talked about over the years to make those departments more efficient. And she was able to do it, I think, because of her understanding of government. And of course, when you make those kinds of radical changes and you don't go through a legislative process or a referendum to do them, yes, some people are going to say, that's too big a move, or maybe with some of her other incremental changes, that's not big enough of a move. I've been in City Hall for 9 years, and there's no one that's gotten 100% perfect marks from the general public.
One of those big moves was obviously the Sixers arena plan. And the result is that we will soon have a new Sixers stadium in Market East. What kind of grade would you give Mayor Parker with that particular deal?
Yeah, I don't really give out grades, but I will say that you mentioned some of her catchphrases earlier, and the cleanest, safest, greenest big city with the economic opportunity for all is one of those lines that people, I think, have heard to the point where they're maybe a little tired of hearing it. But that last piece, economic opportunity for all, I think that's what she was going for with the arena. She really believes that it is going to bring a lot of jobs to the city, both in the construction phase, which will last for 5 or 6 years. It's going to be under construction until 2031. And then afterward, there will be a Center City employer, which is Center City is the economic hub of the city for a reason. It's very easy to get to. There are a lot of amenities nearby. And now there will be this other huge employer downtown. And so that is what I think motivated her to try to get this deal done. And she succeeded in getting the deal done. And I think she's very proud of it.
When former Mayor Jim Kenney was in office during the first Trump administration, he acted very much in defiance to what Trump was doing, policies, and how he was handling cities. Do you think Mayor Parker is going to handle Trump 2.0 or the second Trump administration the same, differently?
I don't think anybody is going to treat the second Trump administration the way they treated the first. In 2016, he was not elected by the popular vote. And so there was a certain defiance toward his presidency by people that didn't agree with him politically. We had the Women's March. The women were saying, he was not the president for them. That's not happening this time because he won a majority of the popular vote. And so I think everybody has to have a slightly different perspective on this second Trump presidency. But in addition, Mayor Kenney had a passion for immigration. It had been an issue of his from the early 2000s. He'd been trying to make Philadelphia a hub for new immigrants, and he just felt so strongly about it. And so a lot of his opposition to the Trump administration grew out of his passion for attracting new immigrants to the country and specifically to the city of Philadelphia and making this a welcoming place for them. Mayor Parker does not have that same passion. That's not what drives her or motivates her. And so it's not going to be as big a deal for her. Now, Philadelphia is still a sanctuary city. She hasn't changed any of that. But I don't think that she is as kind of personally offended by Trump's position on immigration as Jim Kenney was. And we're seeing this from a lot of people who were very defiant in the first Trump administration, now are trying to figure out how to work with him and get along with him. Because I think one thing the last 4 years showed under President Biden is that the federal government is really essential, that what it does matters. You can't just ignore it. Cities, big cities need the federal government. And so you have to figure out a way to get along with the president of the United States. And that, I believe, is her plan, to do what she can to get along with him.
Now, back in Philadelphia specifically, what are some of the top of mind issues Mayor Parker is looking forward to for this year?
I think her two big initiatives this year are going to be housing. She pledged during her campaign, and honestly, when she talks about it now, I'm not sure how much thought she put into the number when she produced it, but she said that she was going to build 30,000 new units of housing in the city to assure that there would be enough affordable housing.
You think that's too much, too little?
I think that I think she said this, that she started to wonder just how, in fact, she was going to do that, because 30,000 is a lot. But she's drawing up a plan and keeps getting a delayed, I guess, while the finishing touches are put on it. But I do think she'll be rolling that out kind of early this year. And then the other thing is, she has said about a variety of social issues like drug addiction and homelessness, that her approach is going to be prevention, care, and treatment. So she has to kind of develop the infrastructure to provide those three pillars. So that's going to be a very big thing for her. There is a former nursing home up in the far northeast, but it's now being renovated to be a facility for providing the care. It'll be a shelter, but also a behavioral health treatment center and a drug rehabilitation and recovery center in that building. But so I think that will be her focus.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's chat about City Council and the upcoming race for District Attorney.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Pat, this is also the second year for City Council President Kenyatta Johnson, who just a couple years ago was fighting back some corruption indictment. How is he handling this role as council president?
Well, he seems to be doing fine so far. He certainly has the solidarity of council behind him, which is the most important thing for a city council president to have. Philadelphia has a strong mayor form of government, but city council has shown that it can really hold its own with the mayor if it's united, if it has 9 or more people solidly behind an initiative or an innovation that they want to pursue. And he has been able to hold that majority together, the arena being an example of, getting 12 votes for the arena that had a lot of opposition and a lot of very vocal opposition, that he was able to muster the 12 votes, and they really only need 9, and he had more than he needed to get that passed.
Council President Johnson has worked with Mayor Parker in city council before. What's their relationship now that she is mayor and he is council president?
I think it's pretty good. She was in the leadership of city council when she was a council member, and he was not. So I think that he is a bit differential to her. In the past, we saw with, for instance, Michael Nutter, he had a terrible relationship with city council. Jim Kenney started off with a pretty good relationship. It got rocky at times. I think that Mayor Parker has a good relationship with the council president. I mean, she certainly has been able to get her agenda passed. even when there's been opposition within council itself, she has pretty much been able to exert her will for what she wants to do.
And speaking of that, what are the factions on city council right now?
Well, the Working Family Party is the minority party. There are two members who, just virulently oppose the arena. And so I think they're probably pretty angry. But philosophically, they're not far off from Democrats. And I think they certainly appreciate the elements of her agenda that are, traditional Democratic politics, affordable housing, money for education, that kind of thing. So I wouldn't say that there's any ill will toward the mayor on the part of city council members. I think, it's just barely the beginning of her second year. So they have a long way to go before I think there's enough interaction to, create the kind of tension that might stop her from being able to get things through council.
So is it fair to say that she's maybe just a little more centrist on certain issues than other more liberal council members?
Oh, yes. Yeah, she is. She is very centrist. And there are a few council members who are far more progressive than her. The Working Families Party I mentioned. There's also Jamie Gauthier, district councilwoman. There's councilwoman at large, Rue Landau. And I know that a lot of people view city council as an extremely progressive body, and I think they are. They have passed a lot of very progressive legislation. But I think, by and large, they reflect the city, which is, I think, probably left of center. Like the center in Philadelphia is probably left of the center in some other places. But I think most of them, fall within a pretty tight spectrum.
Pat, there's also a big election coming up for district attorney. Is our current district attorney, Larry Krasner, going to face a ton of opposition?
Doesn't seem that he will face any opposition. I mean, the election is only about 5 months away, and there are no declared candidates. That is the primary election, as we know. Whoever wins the Democratic primary is the de facto winner in November. There was a lot of talk about former Councilman Derek Green, who ran for mayor, running for district attorney, but that seems to have been just a rumor because he has not declared in. He hasn't even been very visible or vocal recently. So it looks like it's probably a third term for Larry Krasner.
Now, is that surprising to you, though? I mean, Krasner has been super controversial in a lot of circles for being a reformist DA. So, why aren't there more opponents?
I don't know. And I do think it's maybe a weakness of the Democratic Party in Philadelphia that the party itself has not been able to run a single candidate. I mean, the key here would be a one-on-one primary. And they haven't been able to persuade anyone to run against Krasner. And I say that, the party might have selected a candidate because I know the leadership of the city Democratic Committee, Krasner is not their favorite person. People certainly support the things that he's doing in terms of exonerations and so forth. But there are a lot of complaints about the way he handles cases, the way he pleads down very serious offenses in order to avoid trials. And so people accused of, aggravated assault and battery, some very serious crimes end up with very little jail time. That's the main complaint I've heard about him. And I've heard it from ward leaders and I've heard it from committeemen. And so it does seem odd that there's no effort to try to mount a challenge to him.
Pat, as the City Hall Bureau Chief for KYW, you've been covering politics for some time now. What has changed? What's the same in Philly? And are you still having fun?
Oh, yeah. I love my job. I have the best job in journalism. I'm convinced. I really love covering Philadelphia politics and government. And, a lot of things have changed, but there's one thing that hasn't that I could mention, and that is the leadership of the Philadelphia City Democratic Committee. Back in the 90s, the Philadelphia Inquirer had a magazine, actually, and my husband was the City Hall bureau chief back then, and he wrote a magazine story about Bob Brady, the head of the city committee. And the subhead was, some people think it's time for a change. That was 32 years ago. Bob Brady is still the head of the Democratic Party. And so that's something that hasn't changed at all.
Why is he still in charge?
He's obviously very good at his job. He is democratically elected by the ward leaders and the committee people, and they keep voting him in. And so that's why he's still there.
Wow. Maybe some things in Philly are hard to change. Pat Loeb, City Hall Bureau Chief for KYW. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Trinae.
You can listen to Pat Loeb on KYW on 1060 AM and 103.9 FM. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode about local politics, tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.